portfolio now with one of the most interesting topics in the world of football, which is the football transfer market, or what we call the transfer windows, which specifically in Saudi Arabia took the world by storm by registering some of the largest signings or the biggest transfers in history, as discussed earlier. For most of us, what we hear is the end product, which is Cristiano was offered this, Messi was offered that, X signed here, Y moved there. However, behind this englobes an entire world behind the scenes, and in our next panel we will explore and expose the behind the scenes complexities within the football market. We will examine the strategies used by the clubs, the negotiation processes, the impact of financial regulations, and the trends that shape player movements.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Sabah al khair. Ahlan wa sahlan. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our panel discussion, Behind the Scenes, the Challenges and Trends in the Football Transfer Market. Something very interesting, and with this distinguished guest today, I think it will be amazing to talk about this topic. So what we will do, so you give you an overview. We go first and see what happened in the last decade in the football transfer market. Later on, we talk about some specific areas today, and then we will delve into the new FIFA agent regulations, which has a huge impact into the future, not just for agents, but also for players, clubs, and everyone else. So I give already the word and start right away with my panelists, with my great speakers. And on my right, I have Marcos Motta, and I will address the first question to you, Marcos. In your view, what has been the most significant change in the football transfer market over the last decade?
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this morning to discuss this great topic. My same colleagues, James, Gonçalo, Nasr, and Erkut, thank you so much. That's a very interesting issue, what happened in the last decade. Actually, I think that the change in the transfer market has evolved since the late 90s, from the Bosman case in 95 that created the figure of the free agent. And I think that this has changed the entire market in terms of how the transfers has been built and engineering. Then you came to that I call the second cycle between 2001 and the late 90s. I think that the Galacticos were like a pillar that also has changed the market and the relationship between the player, the club, and the market. And I was fortunate to work with the Galacticos, advising, for example, Roberto Carlos, Robinho, Kaká, and many players that play in that fantastic Real Madrid in between 2000 and 2002. And then came the COVID, right? And also that's changed the market in terms of that the industry and the product went beyond the 90 minutes. The players as a content creators, the digital era with the FANGs, the Facebook, the Amazon, the Google, that has turned the players into superstars and clubs as content hubs. So I think in the last decade, we experienced the super transfer of Neymar, 2017, that also has changed all the dynamic in terms of the monetization of a football player, the monetization of a whole league as the French league. And I witnessed that change in terms of the contractual issues that we faced at that time. And now with the cycle 3, I think that the cycle 3 is that where we are now, is the emergence again of the concept of the players are the new players, the concept of the sportainment, sports and football as an entertainment, and is a very important concept. And I think that here in Saudi Arabia, the way that this the product of the Saudi League, as Michael was explaining here, it's a very interesting momentum, how the market will change. So I'm very excited what is about to come in the near future.
Thank you very much, Marco. It was Marcos for the introduction into this whole world, what happened in the past and what's going on today. I give the word now to Nasr. Nasr, what would you say? What's the major changes and trends in the football transfer market in the last decade?
Thank you, Erkut. A pleasure to be here with you and with my dear colleagues in Saudi Arabia. I believe that, of course, the more investment occurring in football and the increase of the revenues to the clubs, it increased, of course, the transfers happening worldwide, and that's a significant change. What it makes it more the investment of governments or countries Like we have, for example, the City Football Group that started also to be expanding 10 years ago. So that's help, of course, the increase of the transfer market and make significant change in the market, because they, of course, have different clubs in different countries, and this is also make a very big change. But what I can say now in last 10 years and what's happening here in Saudi Arabia, in the Saudi Pro League, I think this is the most significant change, not just because it's just started to attract players from all over the world, but the big change what we are seeing here now, that is not what we had regularly in the MENA regions, that we bring players that they are at the end of their career from Europe, but now they are going to targeting the prime players in their prime of their career. So this is, of course, it's a very significant change, and of course that's why it will take the Saudi League and Asian football as well to a different level. So what I see now that the question is from even the top coaches for European clubs, what the Saudi League is going to be. Is it will be same like the Chinese League, that just for a certain period or not? With my experience now here in Saudi Arabia, dealing with many clubs for more than 10 years now, you can see the change is not just started from this transfer window. They are started very long time ago, how they make change in the football industry there in Saudi Arabia. That's why it will be, I believe it will be attracting more players with a long-term project for 10 years. So this is something I think it will be having more significant changes. And the question will be from the European clubs, what will be, this happen just in one transfer window? What will happen in 10 transfer windows? This will be a very important question in the future transfers.
Thank you very much. That was great to hear about the Saudi market especially, and then the connection with the European market and what will happen in future. I give the word now to James, far on the right, from Australia, and let's see what he thinks about the transfer market.
Thanks, Erkut. Thank you to the organizers of the World Football Summit Asia for having me back after I was at the last edition in Kuala Lumpur in 2019, and great to be on the stage with so many esteemed colleagues here this morning. I'm going to flip your question and ask it in a different way, because I come from a regulator, a governing body perspective, not talking just about the football transfer market, but about the football transfer system as a whole. And what I've seen over the past decade in the context of a market, and everybody here probably engages in multiple markets in different ways, but you know that a market is regulated, a market has controls, a market has disclosure obligations, a market has investor obligations, etc. And what the football transfer market was post-Bosman, coming up to 2015 to 2018, it was probably the world's largest unregulated market. More than $7 billion floating around the world in transfer fees, in international transfer fees, the same amounts of money that were paid in salaries, and also in the domestic markets as well, in certain countries also hitting $1 billion or similar amounts. So for me, the biggest actual change is recognition from the governing bodies that something had to be done. Something had to be done about those markets, not to stifle the markets or to control the markets, but to properly regulate the markets, bring in professional standards, bring in things which the clubs were all asking for with respect to protections for players or transfer windows or agent regulation or rules with respect to loans. The types of things you'd see in another market that operated in this way in a different sector, but in football, because the market had grown so quickly and so viciously over that sort of 20 years plus since Bosman, didn't really exist. So FIFA in itself started its transfer reform process in 2017, and we're now 6 years down the track, and we are almost at the end of all the topics that form part of that transfer reform, but you can see the fruits of that labor, and for me that's the biggest thing that I've seen, and I understand we'll talk about one of those things specifically later, so I'll stop there for you.
Thank you very much, James, for these insights. Very interesting. I give the word to your left on you, to Gonçalo, our final guest from Portugal. What would you think, Gonçalo? What do you think are the major changes and trends, and especially in the last 10 years?
Thank you.
Yeah? You maybe get this one. Maybe do this one? You're welcome.
Yes. Well, thanks for the question. First of all, thanks the World Football Summit for the kind invitation to attend this event here. Also, I would like to say thanks to our hosts from Saudi Arabia for the way we were welcomed in this country. Coming to your question, the last decade, a lot of things happened. I still remember I started working at FIFA in the legal department back in August 2001, where I stayed for 5 years. And the last 5-6 years of this new administration, this current administration, there's a lot of improvements, a lot of regulation going on, new regulations going on. Of course, we have women's football regulated, properly regulated, finally. I mean, we were expecting that for a long time. Coaches, the employment relationship between coaches and clubs and national teams, it's also an important evolution for football, international football regulation system. What I would like to highlight, nevertheless, from a positive side is the prohibition of the TPO contracts back in November 2014. I think at the beginning, for us in Portugal, this was very important in terms of financing clubs. I think the same happened in South America and in Spain and in other jurisdictions. For instance, my club, Benfica, we could never have access to Brazilian national team players if it wouldn't be for investment from investment funds, you know, bringing the player with us. And I mean, I remember Ramirez, who was transferred to Chelsea in 2010. He stayed only for 1 season with Benfica, but I mean, we were champions, and at the end we end up getting a significant percentage of the transfer fee to England. So it was a winning solution for us. However, with time we learned that this, for the industry, for the sake of the industry, to keep the money inside the industry is a much better game. And last, from a negative perspective, I would definitely highlight the introduction of in April 2015 of the FIFA regulations on working with intermediaries, which I think it was a major step back for the industry. The agency activity became
We'll talk about agents. Don't say too much about that
anarchy and absolutely illogical, to say the least.
Yes, definitely. Agree. Thank you very much. I think there's these topics, especially South America, Portugal, TPO, what kind of effect it had before and after, how does it change the transfer market, the transfer world. It's affected Portugal and especially South America a lot, as you said, a very interesting topic. But so now I will come back to you, Marcos. So drawing from your rich experience, Marcos, including the landmark Neymar and Lewandowski transfers, could you shed light on the evolving complexities and legal challenges actually in the modern football transfers?
That's an interesting question. Basically, in the past, you used to call us as a sports lawyer. Now I think that we are much more like business lawyers applied to sports, because it's a very complex environment. And there are certain things in life that very few people can understand, which is the quantum physics, the Bob Dylan lyrics, and the transfers. So I think that this is the reality that we face nowadays. As I said before, we have a very clear concept now in place, which is sportainment, the sports as entertainment. In the past, we had clubs, teams that became clubs, that became nowadays corporations. We had in the past players that became athletes, that now are content creators. And this dynamic has changed also and applied in the transfers, in the way that we build a transfer, in the way that you give a legal certainty in a transfer. Because I remember the first deal that I operated, like in the late 90s, was a transfer from Atlético de Madrid to Flamengo in Brazil. And the contract was only 3 pages. That we have the name of the parties, the financial conditions, and the FIFA jurisdiction. It was the first time, Gonçalo, that I saw a FIFA jurisdiction in a contract. And when we turn into Neymar, just to name one of the players that we advised, we have more than 150 pages. In the past, we used to have like the linear, as I call, transfers, but now we have exponential deals. The variables in the contracts are very complex, And the lawyers, they used to call the day that we sign the contracts at the closing day. Nowadays, I call it a kickoff day, because actually it's when the deal starts, is when you sign the contract. So it's not a matter just to sign, to engineer, and to build the transfer, but how to maintain that transfer and that employment relationship and that IP, intellectual property relationship between a club and the player in motion throughout 2, 3, 5 years. So the relation not only between the player and the club, but also the relationship between the club and the league with the consumer market. So it's a very interesting and complex market.
Thank you very much. I love the description, how you explain how the player, the club all developed. Maybe you have also an explanation for agents. We started as player representatives.
We're going to touch this later.
Yes,
Yeah.
so we talk about that, but thank you. And business lawyer, I like that a lot. So let's move on. Nasr, let's come back to you. With your multifaceted experience in sports law, particularly in the MENA region, and your background as a former football player, many people know that, how do you perceive the unique challenges and trends in the football transfer market, especially in this region?
Okay, of course, the MENA region has, as everyone see, is developing so much recently. And when we say about the Saudi League, we were in Egypt, for example, we were all following and waiting that the possible of Salah transfer from Liverpool to Etihad, and will we play with Etihad in the World Cup for clubs or not here. So this is make really a significant change that also in the MENA region. But the challenge is what I see with my experience with many clubs in the MENA region always, that my dear colleagues come say, okay, unpaid transfer fees or salaries. And this is why it's more occurred in MENA region, is related to maybe the limited resources for the clubs. Is not generating same revenues as the top European clubs, for example. That's make maybe problems that the payments not made on time. And this is what creates a problem. So what is important for future is how to work on these leagues in order to provide more revenues. And this, of course, occurring in Saudi Arabia and occurring also in another leagues as well. We have, for example, the recent Iraqi Football Federation has launched agreement with La Liga for 3 years project, and this, of course, will help to increase the revenues of the clubs there. So we need more working on this kind of projects for partnerships that help the clubs in MENA region to do that. Also, what important significant change what's happening in MENA region, we used always to have our clubs as association, established as association, not private clubs. This according to the national sports law in MENA region countries. But recently, we had change of the sports law in Egypt 2017, in Saudi Arabia, in Emirates, that you are allowed now to have a private clubs in these countries. And this allow more investors, big investors, to come to the market. And of course, this investment help, of course, to develop the market. But at the end, as I say, as a football player, I have, of course, still need more work to be done in order to develop also, as Marcus say, how the revenues, how the players' contract is 150 pages. No, we also need to work more on that aspect in the MENA region with the players.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nasr. I think one of the MENA regions, I sometimes experience the problems as an agent or sports lawyer with payments, and we talked about that earlier, right? It can get better in terms of player salaries, that it's paid on time sometimes, because when I represent players in the region, the first thing is, will I get my money on time? That's the first question, right? In many countries, but it's getting better. It's changed in the last 5-6 years, and we're seeing a development. But I want to give my word now to, I'll come back to you, if it's okay, because James is already waiting and looking at me. So James, given your significant role actually in shaping sports regulation, you're an expert in that at FIFA, but also your expertise in governance and the strategy. How do you assess the impact of evolving regulations on the global football transfer market?
Good question. I think the key word you said there was evolving. So as I said earlier, one of the big issues with the football transfer system, the football transfer market in the previous 2 decades was post-Bosman, as Marcos identified, regulations were put into place which reflected that decision, and then subsequently there was really no movement from the international side for 15 to 16 years, and the regulations didn't keep up with the market. They didn't keep up with the amounts of money being invested, the transfer fees being paid, the growth of player movement across the world with the introduction of free agency into football. So the key issue in terms of the impact of regulations on the transfer market itself is whether they evolve with the market, one, and two, whether they are actually fit for purpose. Because the point of regulation is to ensure that there is an equal playing field globally or locally, depending if the regulations are global or local or however they might be shaped. But also regulations are designed to put into place rules relating to fairness and integrity, but also they're there to address any problems or issues that might arise. And if there's something which is not a problem or not an issue, then there's no need to over-regulate in that aspect. So when FIFA did go through that transfer reform process starting in 2017, what it started with was that last point that I mentioned is, what are the problems that are identified within the market? What are the problems within the system? Let's take the feedback from FIFA, the players, from the European Clubs Association, from the World Leagues Forum. Let's go to the stakeholders and let's ask them, what are the problems that you see? What do we need to address? How can we evolve, modernize, shape our future regulations? And over that last 6 years, there have been some excellent wins. Gonçalo mentioned one, which often falls through the cracks, but coaches. So players very rightly have big protections globally within the football transfer system when you go to play in a foreign country, but coaches effectively fell through the cracks. And as you all know here, coaches are the other actor in football, aside from the referee, but the other actor in football that we like to go watch and enjoy the theatre and the entertainment that occurs in that space. FIFA also introduced regulations governing female players, but specifically covering pregnancy and childbirth, those aspects which are unique to female players, things which weren't in existence at international level previously. But then also, by FIFA introducing that, forces countries that haven't recognized that within their football regulations to also adapt and introduce those types of rules into their football frameworks. There are many others that I could address, but ultimately the idea of the regulatory framework is it needs to evolve, it needs to modernize, and it needs to stay adapted to the common and updated reality of football. The last quick point, as you mentioned with TPO, third-party ownership of players' economic rights, FIFA addressed that in a way in 2014 where it said, we're going to prohibit this. There wasn't a real study done of the impact of it on the industry. It was just decided, we're going to stop and we're not going to do anything, we're just going to ban and prohibit this outright. One of the big hot topics and big challenges now in global football from a transfer system and integrity perspective is multi-club ownership, cross-ownership. And so, as I said yesterday at a different conference, I think it's incumbent on regulators and particularly FIFA in this case to address that topic because it's a live issue, but also address it in a way which takes into consideration all of the feedback from stakeholders that are involved in the game and take into consideration also those multi-club groups and understand the motivations behind why this has found its way into football. Much like with TPO, there was perhaps a lack of understanding as to why TPO was prevalent and what the motivation behind TPO was for clubs like Benfica getting involved or other clubs getting involved in that space. So evolving regulations, the two keywords you should all take away from today.
Thank you very much, James. We're talking about multi-club ownership is the future, but I think it's the present. And that's where we are today. And seeing someone like you in future regulating that area, I think something will come up. Thank you very much for your comments. It was really great. So, Gonçalo, let's come back to you. You are an expert in both sports and immigration law. And could you discuss the immigration laws and policies specifically impact the player transfers and contract negotiations in the football transfers market?
Well, yes, absolutely. And most of us don't really realize how far it influences the transfer market. Immigration laws really have a huge impact on this specific market in football, but not only. I mean, immigration is now a world reality. Everyone, independently of the nationality or the place where we live, we're facing people from different nationalities on a daily basis. For instance, going out a bit of the sports portrait, the residence permits by investment, the so-called golden visas, there's more than 100 countries in the world, you know, having these immigration policies whereby in making an investment, you can obtain nationality. So this shows up how much immigration is an aspect of paramount importance in society in general and in sports in particular. So Brexit is also a very good point. You know, with now with the new reality in England, the relationship with EU players has completely changed. The criteria were more severe. Now they're softer, but still, in order to obtain a work permit or the visa, you need to comply with a certain amount of criteria, such as the caps you had in the previous 24 months before you apply to the work permit, the league where you're coming from, because if you're coming from one of the big five, you get a better score. The continental competitions of your former club, how far your former club went. So this is called the 15 points system in the UK. So this immigration, it's always been an issue. For instance, between Portugal and Brazil, every year we have more than 200 players coming from Brazil to Portugal. Wow. It's the number one immigration flow in the world. And then the second one is from the UK, from England to Scotland. And then the third place, guess what? We have from Portugal back to Brazil. So you see how this is important. As for the regulations, as well, James knows it better than all of us. The FIFA regulations on the status and transfer, they make a reference to work permits with Article 18, paragraph 2, where they say that the validity of a contract, an employment contract, should not be conditioned to the successful medical examination or the grant of a work permit. Okay, so what we're saying is that depending on the complexity or the length of the process to obtain a visa or a work permit, the transfer market may be affected, because I may rather anticipate this transfer because of the length it will take for the player to be registered, or I may just choose to register this, to sign this player with another club from a different jurisdiction, where it's easier to register this player, either because of the player's nationality or because of the player of the country where I'm planning to register him, you know? So it has a deep impact for sure.
Thank you very much. Very insightful. Also, the transfers happening between countries, especially I knew that Brazil and Portugal had a close relationship, but I didn't know that so many transfers happening both ways. It's very interesting. But now let's head to actually the final topic for us, the agents world, right? And with football agents increasingly playing a key role in the football transfer market, working alongside players, clubs, and lawyers, this year's introduction of the new FIFA agent regulations has sparked considerable debate and legal challenges, including significant court decisions. Given this evolving scenario, what are your views on how these regulations will actually shape the regulatory landscape going forward? How might they impact the transfer market? Marcus, you work with many players, but also with many agents. And how do you see what will happen there? What's coming?
Let me step back a little bit, just to take it from what you said, that the concern of the player is to know if they will be paid on time. But I think that the role of the agent, the advisor, the lawyer, is to try to explain to the player that his career and his role is not only based on time. Because if you stick to the 90 minutes of playing, you are limiting your capacity to monetize your career. So when you explain and the player understands, so let's take the three examples of the special ones, as I call it, not Mourinho, the special ones. Let's talk about Cristiano, Messi, and Neymar. These are the different ones, right? What makes them different from the other ones? What makes Real Madrid different from other clubs? What makes Manchester United different from other clubs? Basically, these three players that I just mentioned, they monetize their career 365. The relationship with the clubs is not based only on an employment relationship. They base their career in IP trade, intellectual property trade. And that's what that make them special ones. What makes Real Madrid special one is not just a football club. It's a content hub. It's a hub provider. And that makes a difference between a popular club, that's a very important concept, and a global club. And then come to the agents. I think that FIFA rule, they made a mistake in 2015, deregulated the market. The market became a no man's land. Now they came into the picture again, try to regulate. It's impossible to please all the agents. I think the cap is something that definitely needs some attention, because I think that this somehow is debatable, but I don't go into deep on this. But in general, the FIFA regulations on agents, it's a good one. Basically reintroduce it, number one, the concept of the permanent education, and this is very important. Number two, brought back to FIFA the jurisdiction to deal with matters related to agents, allowed minors to be properly represented. Can you imagine that we advised Vinicius Junior transfer to Real Madrid, and the agent of Vinicius Junior was not able to get a remuneration for the job that he'd done, operating a multi-million deal? I always say that the minor between 12 and 16 is the critical moment of a player's career, is when the player needs and must be well represented, because it's when he will sign his first professional employment contract. So the agents regulations and the actual market brings to two phenomena. Number one, in the future, talking about the future, the MCOs, multi-club ownership. And why multi-club ownership is an interesting phenomenon? Because now it's not only about controlling the specific deal of the specific operation. Now you control the system. And when you control the system, you control the entire market. And about the agents, what's going to happen, in my opinion, the MCOs related to the clubs and the MAGs, I'm calling MAGs, the multi-agency groups, CAA, Warsuman, Stellar, WME, Rock Nation. You see why this is similar to the MCOs? Because doing so, the MAGs, the multi-agents groups, you do not control only the deal. You control the entire system in terms of, again, intellectual property, content creating, management. That's the difference between to be an agent and to be a talent manager. This concept is very well established in the US market, as you probably know. And in doing so, you're absolutely out of the regulations. FIFA has no jurisdiction over commercial matters. So for the agents here in this room, focus in not controlling only the deal, in not controlling only the player, but in controlling the system. Because when you control the system, you control the entire ecosystem of football. So don't see the FIFA regulations as an enemy or an evil, but harder as an opportunity to play around the system and enlarging the activity of not a football agent, but a football and talent manager.
Thank you very much, Marcus. I was even listening like as someone who's 20 years in the business and the agency world. I think many agents will come up to you after this and ask you more questions. So it's very interesting, especially—
Let's grab a coffee.
Yes, especially I agree we need regulations, we need transparency, we need ethical standards for agents worldwide, and especially education. And someone from the regulatory side, I jump over to James, because regulations, James, what do you think?
Well, firstly, just you have to pass Marcos the mic so he can mic drop, because that was excellent. So, but look, Marcos was right, and I admitted it while I was at FIFA, and many other colleagues as well would happily say this publicly, but FIFA made an error in 2015 when it decided to deregulate the football agent industry on a global basis and push back that responsibility to the 211 member associations. Because what happened at that point was, as Marco said, I think you called it a jungle, it became a Wild West, or might have been you, Erkut. Basically, you had a mishmash of rules, with some federations taking their responsibilities with respect to agents seriously, others not. Who's in charge if we have a problem? What happens if this club decides not to pay me as an agent, or I don't get my commission because I'm working for a player that disappears? Problems arose. But I actually take the debate back even further to the concept of what an agent is actually. And everybody here in this room would have used an agent at some point. You all have an accountant that you might ask to make financial decisions on your behalf, or a financial planner. You might have had to engage a lawyer to do something for you in a court or to draw up a commercial contract or do something with respect to one of your businesses. You might have had surgery and the doctor has to make a decision while you're under anesthesia. You're giving them the agency, the power of attorney to step into your shoes to make a decision on your behalf in your best interests. All of those types of industries where you have an agent-client relationship have a number of different factors involved. One is education to access the industry. The ones that I just mentioned normally have a bachelor or master's degree. In football, we're talking about introducing an entrance exam so you understand that what the rules are in place and the things that you have to do around that industry itself. All of them also have what Marcos called professional development. If I take my bar exam in 1993, in 2023, I'm not really going to be up to date with the most modern rules. Or if I get my doctor's license in 1996, again, by 2023, the procedures have changed. My accountant license, my CPA, whatever else that might be. So for a football agent, it's also important to keep up to date with modern trends, modern standards, and changes to the rules. In all of those frameworks as well, for other industries that have agents, there's professional standards that agents have to comply with. You all would have heard of disciplinary boards, of medical disciplinary boards, solicitor disciplinary boards, etc. They're professional standards that people that want to participate in the industry after they've received their license have to adhere to. And if they don't adhere to those things, then they may be disciplined. They might lose their license. Their license might be suspended. They might have conditions put on their license to ensure that their behavior in future is improving. And similarly, those industries also have dispute panels, whereby if there is a dispute with respect to the services provided from the agent to the person seeking their advice or services, they can resolve those disputes. And those disputes usually revolve around money and the quality of services that are provided to the individual that engages the agent. Let's flip back to football. In the football agent regulation reform that FIFA introduced, all of those things which I just discussed, which are all very standard parts of the agent-client relationship across a number of different industries, that's what's being introduced back into football. Entry requirements. So not just anyone can be an agent, but you have to pass an exam to show that you understand the industry and know what you're doing within that industry. Professional behavioral standards. So you have to behave a certain way, comply with the code of ethics of FIFA, comply with other rules and regulations about your behavior with respect to the FIFA football agent regulations. There's discipline in case things go wrong. There's a dispute resolution mechanism, and there's a certain number of professional development courses that you need to do every year. And if, as our friends just mentioned, you want to represent minors, so players under the age of 18, you have to do a specialized course to ensure that you have the capacity and understanding and knowledge to represent minors. Those are all the things that FIFA are introducing back to the global football agents industry with respect to its football agent regulations. And I don't think anyone in this room can argue that those are bad things. Well, you probably can argue those are bad things, but I think my arguments are stronger. On the sporting side, there are a couple of things which FIFA is also introducing based on its research into the sector and research into the issues that have arisen. And one of those things is the cap on the service fees that agents are due to receive from players, coaches, and others for the services they provide. Now, that has been the subject of a court challenge across many different jurisdictions. There was a decision in England 2 weeks ago with respect to the validity of that vis-a-vis English law. But if we ignore that for a second and ignore that point, because that's what's making all the noise, but we go back to the bare basics of whether the regulations are good or not, all of those things that I spoke about from a process perspective and an industry perspective are good things, and they should be welcomed. And I think many agents within the industry would welcome those as good things and good things that can be implemented.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you. A lot of information on that. Thank you. I mean, we are all on the same page. I think we all want regulations and transparency for all agents worldwide. And thank you for that, all the aspects you brought up. So let's now, the final two speakers. Nasr, let's start with you, and then Gonçalo, I want to find out what you think about the agents regulations and how is it impacting, especially in this region, for example. How do you work as a lawyer with agents in the MENA region, and what do you think about the agents regulations?
Okay, I see that, of course, I agree with my dear colleagues that the FIFA had made a mistake when it deregulated the agents in 2015. And then I see now that they over-regulated the a matter of the agent's work. This is what make, of course, challenges for the regulations, and as James just said, that the English court had decided, and other courts will be already deciding as well, which will make at the end change in this regulation. So what I see is that it's important now to the agents, especially in our region. We had also more difficulties for maybe passing the exams, and this is what I received from many agents in MENA region. We cannot pass the exam. I see that the exam also not made like maybe they are expert as a lawyers. At the end, agent also use lawyers at the end to their work. So I believe also the licensing system could be also reviewed as well, because there are some countries no one agent passed the exam. So you leave also some countries in Africa or MENA region without official agents. So this will affect at the end the market as well. So what I believe that, of course, in future maybe there will be changes. And the most important, as Marcus has said, that the agents should not just be working as brokers. I just make the transfer, and this is very important thing I can say to the agents in the MENA region, that you need more to be like a manager for the player career. And this, I always speak to my clients from the agents here in this region, that you need to be more overlooking the point that how you create a brand for the players. So we had an example like Mohamed Salah from Egypt, and how he helped with his agent to be more global player.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And also with Mohamed Salah, it's an interesting point raising in the end. Final words. Gonçalo, you will close our panel. You are the one who tells us what will happen with the agents regulations.
Well, I'm not sure what will happen with the agents regulations. I guess no one really does by now. What I would like to enhance is because I'm a positive person, so I rather watch things from the positive side rather from the negative side. And as James just said, the new football agents regulations, they're extremely positive. They come up with introducing aspects that are of paramount importance for the industry. For instance, before the intermediaries, anyone could be an intermediary. You just needed to register yourself at your FA without any specific knowledge about the industry. And now you have this knowledge test. You also have, before you had the need, if you wanted to work, let's say you're Saudi Arabian, but you want to make participate in a deal in Qatar, you needed to register also as an intermediate as in Qatar or in any other jurisdiction where you would want to work. So now you have a universal license. And now, as Marcus just said, it's fair. It's only fair that as an agent, if you represent minors of age, you are remunerated for that work, and so there's and of course we have the jurisdiction of FIFA back, which is of vital importance to have these specialized people deciding upon disputes about football instead of having common courts sometimes with people, judges who have no knowledge whatsoever about the specificities of sports. I mean, this is a tremendous evolution, positive evolution. Regarding the regulations itself, we'll see how it goes. The way I see it, it's going to be hard for I imagine that the idea of FIFA, when they established these regulations, was to have a universal, transversal to all countries around the world. Well, now if England is not gonna make part of that group, this is gonna bring some competitive advantage to the English market, or to the German, perhaps in the future, or the Spanish, depending on the definitive court rules. And many of our clients, just to give you a final example, many of our clients, they tell us, look, if I have to choose between jurisdiction, a club registered in a national association where the FAR are implemented, or England, I will transfer my player to England, where I can collect a higher commission. Or I will dedicate myself to just intermediating players, and then I'll collect a 10% commission, or I'll stick to my top players. And these just to finish. This will lead us to this question. If we keep this service fee cap, many of the players who have average sellers, still very good sellers, like 100,000 euros per season, the agents will only collect 6,000 maximum according to this service fee cap. Would that be enough to keep them satisfied? Probably not. So these players, they will, unless they pay a fixed fee to the agents, like they pay to marketeers, lawyers, psychologists, anyone. I mean, these players are going to be abandoned.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we're over time already. We don't want to let the other panelists and guests wait. That would be rude. I want to say shukran jazilan, ma salama. Thank you very much. And big applause to our great speakers.